The views and content expressed on the following program are provided solely for informational and entertainment purposes. They do not constitute legal advice. A podcast is not a substitute for retaining a competent, licensed attorney to advise you on your specific legal situation.
Break the business, play is work and work is play. Power into creators, have fun along the way. Break the business, doing what it takes. Celebrate success and learn from the mistakes.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is time for Break the Business, where we empower indie creators and have some fun along the way. I'm Ryan Kairalla, and it is a pleasure to have you here this week. Oh my goodness. Words can only begin to express how excited I am for this week's show. I mean, words perhaps are not even fully capable of describing the spectacular show we have this week. Amazing topics that I'm so excited to dig into. A terrific guest coming up in the second segment. We're going to be joined by the American Idol Season 7 winner, David Cook, amazing rock artist, amazingvolume.com live streamer, one of my favorite musicians out there. I've always enjoyed his work. And so I'm not only excited to interview him for just the insights that I know he's going to provide, I'm excited to interview him just as a fan. And so I'm particularly giddy this week. It's going to be a blast. Also excited for the co-host joining us this week. Let's go ahead and bring him out. Musician, investor, and frontman for Gideon King and City Blog. Gideon King is here. Hi, Gideon.
Howdy.
So great to hear from you, my friend. The stars have aligned because the topics that we have on the docket this week line up so well with all things Gideon King that I know this is going to be an absolute blast. And I'm excited for the two of us together to get to talk to David Cook. That's going to be super, super cool. I think you might like David Cook for the same reason I do, Gideon. I don't know if you were a big fan of American Idol in those early years. I was. In fact, I would even credit American Idol for being the reason that I got into the music business. Like I loved watching that show, and it was one of my early formative experiences in all things music industry. And while I loved pretty much all of the early American Idol winners, I loved me Kelly Clarkson and Fantasia and Carrie Underwood, and they were all fantastic. David Cook spoke to me in a different way because I think David Cook was the first American Idol winner who rocked. And that isn't, and I use that term in a particular way, right? Because, Kelly Clarkson certainly rocks in her own way, but David Cook was a rock singer and was kind of the first one to make it to the top and kind of was a sort of a shift in what we might consider an American Idol winner, and it changed the tone going forward. And it was just, it's cool for me. And I think as a rock artist that you are, he probably has a special place in your heart for a similar reason.
Totally. I mean, I work with a lot of vocalists, and there's like 50 vocalists in the USA who are great singers and also have a great quality to their voice. Guys like David Cook or Mark Broussard is one that comes to mind, who's a great singer. And so, when I work with vocalists, you can work with these like technically perfect vocalists and they're amazing, but you sort of like, you finish the recording and you're like, God, that was sparkling and it was beautiful and it was wonderful. But where was that deeply unique human shooting star? And when you hear guys like David Cook or Mark Broussard or Tom Waits or Rod Stewart or whatever, I mean, like, let's just, Eddie Vedder, whatever, let's go through. It's really the quality, the soul, and the unique nature of the voice itself that stands out, because there's too many technically perfect folks out there, but not that many people who are really different. And then, of course, great rock and roll voices they're just cool. They're just cool, man. And he has a great rock and roll. He just has a great rock and roll voice. So it's like, it is what it is. It's undeniable,
And as generations proceed and we feel like it's harder and harder to find rock's place in the music industry, we need to protect and preserve and appreciate the rock voices that are still out there. And even though most casual music fans might know David most from American Idol, what I appreciate him for the most is what he's been doing recently, whether it's the philanthropy, whether it's putting out music independently, whether it is the really cool stuff he's doing on the live streaming side these days with his fan club on volume.com. That's the stuff that really moves the needle for me and says, this is a break the business guest right here. And I'm just so excited to dig into all these topics with him in the second segment.
Absolutely, man. It's cool to see people have success in one place and then continue the intensity and the vigor. Because a lot of people just sort of have this flash of success and then the intensity and the vigor goes away. But he's hard at it, man. He's hard at it.
That's a very good way of putting it. It's cool to see what he did with the opportunities that Idol gave him, and the stuff he's doing now really blows my mind. But the process of preparing for the interview this week with David Cook is not the only thing that got me excited about this week's show. The other piece of show prep that I got to do that I'm excited to dig into you now here in the first segment is the documentary that I watched. So in preparation for this week's show, you and I, Gideon, watched the new Netflix documentary Dirty Pop about the late boy band manager and convicted Ponzi schemer and bank frauder Lou Pearlman. And I will say, Gideon, this was probably for me, the best music industry documentary I've seen probably since 20 Feet from Stardom, which I think won an Academy Award. I mean, this really spoke to me and taught me things. I thought I knew a lot about Lou Pearlman. I did a whole show about Lou Pearlman years ago when he passed away, I think in 2016. And, clearly I didn't know Lou Pearlman because I watched this documentary and was blown away. So I'll open with this, and then I want to get some of your insight, which is what I knew of Lou Pearlman, the original manager of the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and LFO and Aaron Carter and all of these like big pop artists and pop groups from the 90s and early 2000s. I knew him as the unsavory music manager, right? All these stories about him exploiting artists, and NSYNC and Backstreet Boys had legendary 7-8 figure lawsuits to get out of these particularly predatory management deals that Lou Pearlman had with them. That's what I knew him as. And if you were to make a list of like the terrible stuff that Lou Pearlman has done and how he's hurt people, the stuff he did as a music manager like doesn't even make the first page, because the really messed up stuff is the stuff that I didn't know as much about him, which was the criminal stuff that he did. The fact that he executed over the course of 15 years a $300 million Ponzi scheme, the proceeds of which were used to basically fund the careers of NSYNC and Backstreet Boys. Most of pop music, as we know it from those decades, came from the funds of defrauded investors. And that blew my mind. And the story of just how all that happened and how it was able to happen for so many years without anybody figuring it out or blowing the whistle on it. And then just the legendary collapse that came in the mid-2000s that ultimately led to Lou Pearlman's imprisonment and his death. Just my jaw dropped for the entire 120-minute documentary. And I'm so glad I'm talking to you about it this week, Gideon, because obviously you're an experienced investor. I imagine you've encountered quite a few unsavory characters in this industry in your time. And I imagine that as you were watching it, you weren't just watching it as a music industry person like I was. You were watching it as an investor, and that probably allows you to give some unique perspective.
I mean, I think one of the yes, and yes. I think one of the reasons that this document, I think one of the reasons it appealed to you and appealed to me and might appeal to others is that the documentary itself transcends music. It's a million different psychological stories. It's a story about a deeply pathological, very needy, incredibly insecure man. It's a story about a man who was capable of warmth and probably wanted good things for these artists while simultaneously robbing them blind. It's a story about sort of amazing new genres germinating from ugliness. And so the layered complexity of the story is what makes it interesting. If he was pure evil, if he was nothing but a black hole of turpitude, then then you'd sort of say like, okay, that documentary was okay. But what makes it so complex is that there were these layers of warmth interwoven into his pathology and all the pain that he visited on people. I can tell you that you said something interesting, which I agree with, I disagree with, and I agree with, and I disagree with. You said like the things that he did to the music artists paled in comparison to what he did financially in terms of his sort of Bernie Madoff-like Ponzi scheme, which is exactly what it was. It was a Bernie Madoff-like Ponzi scheme, exactly the same principle. But actually, you know what? Having been defrauded myself by one particular guy who was like the standard bearer for this one industry, the poster child for this one industry, and who I put my own money into and friends of mine money into. And I mean, like, I can say that it was the psychological fraud that was the most painful for all of us. And when you looked at the interviews from the guys from NSYNC and some of the other people, you could just see that extraordinary mixture of devastation and confusion about this man that was kind to them and simultaneously stabbing them in every part of their spine. And so, like, I think that his indiscretions, of course, were financial and of course were contractual. That's why, he had minimum sentencing guidelines of whatever the hell it was, 20 years. But I think that the psychological frauds that he visited on people were beyond painful. And it must be a strange dissonance for all of those huge bands to say, like, the root of my very fruitful tree is rotten.
Yeah.
The germinating forces of what made NSYNC what it was are rotten. And that's like a crazy level of psychological dissonance for any thinking sentient human being. So yes, great documentary. Yes, a fascinating guy, not in a good way, but he was very human in many ways. And so, yeah, man, I mean, it was really interesting. And the other thing I think that's worthy of comment is that we think of evil as this monolithic linear concept, and it's just not. And you learn that as you get older. There were people at the end of that documentary, Ryan, saying how much they loved him and how devoted they were to him. That one woman who was an assistant or whatever, I can't remember her name, of course, because I'm having a Joe Biden moment. But it was, sorry about that. But it was incredible how some of these people had this kind of unmitigated, unstinting love for the guy. So complex, really frightening, and actually super sad.
I mean, even some of the boy band members that were being interviewed in this documentary who were exploited and defrauded by him, even some of them at the end were like, yeah, he did some terrible things, but, his legacy is more complicated than that. Like, look at all the good he did for pop music. I was like, even after all of that, like, you're still trying to, like, find some ambiguity in his life. Like, that's a testament to the psychological hold he had on people. And you brought up something towards the end that I think that is something I'm having trouble with and reconciling with. Like, when this documentary was over, I felt like crap because I really enjoy a lot of that music. I loved the Backstreet Boys and I loved NSYNC. And I don't know how to reconcile the fact that music that I love so much was built off of the broken dreams of thousands of people who lost their life savings at the hands of this guy.
Listen, it's a great point, and the only thing we can do is reconcile the dissonance of all beautiful art. Van Gogh was a horrific human being. Faulkner was a horrific human being. Michael Jackson was a very flawed person, from what I read, and yet some of the greatest music ever. I mean, Van Zandt from Leonard Skinner, right? Like, violent, racist, crazy man in some respects. But you know what? They wrote some of the greatest music of all time. I mean, two things come to mind. One, never meet your heroes in some respect, and two, every great fortune starts with a crime. If you walk down the street in New York City and you look at the pavilions of the hospitals, and you look at these names of these like iconic business people, and then you trace back to the roots of those iconic business people, the first dollars they made were clawed away from others in ways that are very frightening. And so, like, art, like everything else, is imperfect, has imperfect roots, and we have to enjoy it for its intrinsic qualities, not for its lineage. Because if we did that, man, everybody from Prokofiev to Beethoven to Leonard Skinner to Led Zeppelin to the Beatles, man, we would be super disappointed if we fell in love if we fell in love with the art, hoping to fall in love with the people. That would be a very, very big mistake.
Oh yeah, but this isn't like an artist is complicated and I have to sort of, can I separate the art from the artist? This is the engine that fueled the art getting to my eyes and ears was fueled by people getting money stolen from them, and that's hard for me. But
look at the links. Some of these band members, I hate to say it, just to be honest, they were taken in by the shiny diamonds, right?
Yeah.
They themselves said, "Oh, I walked in and I saw the private jet. Oh, I walked in and there was like whatever. There was steak tartare on the table, and we were flying in a private jet and swimming in amazing swimming pools in Orlando or California. I guess it was Orlando in this case. So like even the artists who created some great 3-part harmonies and some great tunes, even their output and the inception of their artistic creation was sullied by greed, avarice, love of the shiny object. Man, human beings, misfiring circuits. We just have to accept it.
Can I ask you something?
No, absolutely not.
All right. Good night, everybody.
We're done. We're done.
As somebody who lives in this world, not in the evil Ponzi schemer world, but in the investment class generally, and a lot of wealthy people.
Yeah.
I've always wondered this, whether it's Bernie Madoff or whether it's Lou Pearlman or any of these people, how do they not get caught sooner? And I ask it this way, right? Because I'm watching this documentary, and as you see Lou Pearlman doing all of these things, spending so ostentatiously, right? He says that he makes his money in airplanes, but he's spending money like he's a Middle Eastern oil sheik. Like, how do people not see that and go, something's not adding up? Someone should be looking into this. Maybe I shouldn't do business with this person.
Things.
Like, how do these people get away with it for so long when it's so clear that they're spending more than they could possibly have? 3 things. Lay it on me, brother.
1, charm. Okay? Everybody from Lou Pearlman to Ted Bundy to John Edwards, even Donald Trump, I hate to say it, has moments of charm. Not for me, but for some, okay? Charm is seductive and clouds clear vision. 1. 2, flattery. And making people feel important and good about themselves. Lou Pearlman
was supposed to be legendary at
like
that.
Bill Clinton. They say that when you sat in a room with Bill Clinton, he could make you feel like the most important person in the world. So Lou Pearlman looked into these kids' eyes and made them feel like legends before they were, and created in their own minds a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's more powerful than crack. And so that's number 2. And then 3, the most insidious part of fraudulent characters is they're usually pretty smart. And Lou Pearlman was a visionary. He had a vision. He realized that vision. So you look at this person and you say, well, geez Louise, like he's really good at that. He was right about that. And then you extrapolate that they would be right about other things. And then you kind of extrapolate to a general rightness about them, about their persona, even their ethics. And so charm and flattery and intelligence is a nasty cocktail which pulls the wool over people's eyes and makes them not basically check on the basics of what the hell is going on. Bernie Madoff could have been caught 50 times over, and actually was. Many people wrote to regulators saying, oh, excuse me, this man's the biggest thief in America and worse. And the regulators paid no attention. The man was on the board of the NASDAQ Stock Exchange because of charm. And so it's those 3 forces, amongst others, of course, I'm not being being a little glib, that make fraudsters amazingly capable at what they do.
I guess the 4th thing, if you had to throw a 4th thing in there that allowed him to escape scrutiny for so long, from what I remember of this documentary, is apparently Lou Pearlman was just god tier level at forging stuff.
Oh yeah, he was a good forger.
You know, he could forge asset documents that could fool the biggest banks in the world. There's even a part where they talk about how he had this company, Transcontinental Airways, that owned 0 planes.
Yeah, right.
And he would trick investors into thinking that his company owned planes by taking photographs of a model toy airplane using forced perspective, like up against like the backdrop of an airport to make it look like it was a real plane sitting in the hangar of an airport. And like that's like Frank Abagnale Catch Me If You Can type
I had
stuff.
a guy-
That's insane.
This guy I was referring to before started operating under his dead uncle's name to compete in the very business that we bought from him, only for us to find out like months later by a website developer that this dude was operating under a fake name to compete against us after we bought his business, and he signed something saying he wasn't going to compete. And by the way, this guy was charming. Boy, was he flattering. He was really smart and a pioneer in the engineering business. Fraud is super complex. And by the way, it wasn't just physical forgery; it was psychological forgery on the part of Lou Pearlman. You know, the whole like sounds like a pretty good deal, right? If I pull you in, make you a big singer, and create your. I mean, he always had like this elegant reduction down to life. Like, I do this for you, you become famous, we both become rich. Boom. Tidy, elegant, tied up in a bow. So he was a psychological forger. And what he forged psychologically was tidy reductions to seduce people into going along. It's happened to the shrewdest people I know have been defrauded. I guarantee you, your guest David Cook could probably point to a few people in the entertainment business, maybe who didn't steal from him directly, but kind of psychologically defrauded him in one way or the other. In my band, I have members who made it deep into American Idol and America's Got Talent. They have stories of being psychologically defrauded.
Man. Don't
get too depressed. There's some good people out there.
But that's a good jumping off point to talk about the music side of this, because I think, you know, obviously it was the criminal stuff, the Ponzi scheme stuff, the bank fraud stuff that landed him in prison. And, you know, was certainly the more legally destructive aspect of his professional career. But we should provide a little bit of conversational time to some of the perhaps not illegal but unethical things that he did as a music manager. And the movie does kind of go into detail about how he did some pretty underhanded things to NSYNC and Backstreet Boys to kind of siphon a lot of money from these groups. I mean, he talked about how, like, first of all, like, if I, like, as a lawyer, if I found out that one of my artist clients' music managers, started working with a band that was built to be a direct competitor of my client, I would have some words with that manager. But that's exactly what Lou Pearlman did. Lou Pearlman had the Backstreet Boys, and he was like, well, and he said in the movie, he's like, well, the only thing better than owning Coke is owning Coke and Pepsi. And so he starts up NSYNC to directly compete with the Backstreet Boys so that he can, you know, participate in both sides of the boy band feud, even if it means that those two bands now are competing against each other. Like, that's pretty bad. He would set up his management deals where not only would he get paid as a manager, getting his, 10, 15%, 20% commission, but then he would also cut himself in as effectively a sixth member of the band and get an additional cut as an artist, and just was like siphoning money from them along the way. We talked about this before the show, but I think this particular story is poignant. In the first part of the documentary, they're interviewing Chris Kirkpatrick of NSYNC, and he tells this story of Lou Pearlman. Like, when the band starts to get a little bit of success, Lou Pearlman says, guys, we're going to have this big press conference. I'm going to invite all the label people and all the press and everything, and we're going to give each of you, your first gold, platinum record, and you're going to get a big check for all the money you've earned. And this is like early in their career. None of them made any money. They're really excited, and they're up on stage at this press conference, and Chris Kirkpatrick gets handed a giant check for $10,000. And he goes, oh my God, this is more money than I've ever seen in my life. And another member of the band, I think it was JC Chazet, turns to Chris and says, Chris, how much money did you make waiting tables at Outback Steakhouse? And Chris goes, oh, shoot, or, oh, shit. And realizes, oh, my God, I'm getting completely stolen from by this manager. And so those stories are there. And they're a powerful cautionary tale for artists about being careful with what managers you do business with.
Yeah. And, artists are always going to be faced with a Hobson's choice. Many artists don't have the money to produce the music they want to produce with the people they want to produce it with. And so when one comes to them with a small amount of money relative to what a big or even a meaningful artistic career can produce, in hindsight, that small amount of money seems like a ripoff for the artist relative to what the person giving or the entity, the label, whoever, the Lou Pearlman, seems like a ripoff relative to what the Lou Pearlman is getting. On the other hand, you got to start somewhere. And when you start somewhere, that somewhere, at least it was for me when I started, is a pretty bad deal. The somewhere that I started, when someone said, I'll give you a little money to manage, and you get a percentage. Had I known how good I was going to be at it and how big my business would have gotten, I never would have cut that deal. On the other hand, I was nowhere, not somewhere. And so that tiny amount of money and that deal got me started. And was it a fair deal? No. Do I regret it? No. And I bet you if you ask the NSYNC guys and those other guys, do they fundamentally regret, truly, if you injected them with truth serum and gave them sodium pentothal, what would they really say? I bet you if they were hypnotized and you said, do you regret meeting Lou Pearlman in the first place? I bet you the answer would be start with an N, not a Y.
I feel like, and maybe this is easy for me to say,
Right.
not being them.
Right.
If I were a member of NSYNC and having experienced everything I experienced, made all the money I made, and you asked me, do I regret meeting Lou Pearlman? My answer is unequivocally yes. And yes, I give some credence to the argument. Yeah, Lou Pearlman exploited me, but I still made some money. And I'm guessing that even Chris Kirkpatrick has more wealth than most people in America do. The vast majority of Americans, right? He's probably doing okay for himself. But if I had to, if I had to face the fact that everything that I do have, the career, the wealth, the celebrity, the notoriety, was built off of the backs of people whose, everything that was used to fund my music, fund my career was stolen money from people, I would have a lot of trouble living with myself. That would be very hard for me.
Well, then you better not take the train anywhere. You better not ride on the highways anywhere, because all the money that started the first railroads was pretty dark money. Meaning, none of us are pristine. The very assets that we use and the roads that we drive on have pretty dark roots. I'm okay with that.
Our world was built with blood, Ryan.
Yeah. And by the way, it wasn't just the money that NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys got, right? It was an incredible brand name that they were associated with, huge psychic income and fame, gigantic careers, and an aura around them that will never be erased. So thank you very much, Lou, you fucking crook, but thank you very much.
I'll have to mark that.
Oh, yeah, sorry about the
all right,
the
so
F-bomb.
we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time to really go into this, but I do want to devote at least a few minutes to this because I wanted to get your perspective on it.
Let's do it.
Real quick, more legal news here. We've been talking a few weeks ago about how the major labels filed a pretty big copyright lawsuit against the AI platform Suno and the AI platform Udio. These are generative AI music platforms. You can enter in a prompt and it creates music for you to enjoy. Creates completely new songs generated by AI. It's no secret that these platforms were created by being trained on copyrighted music material. The record labels have made it pretty clear they believe that to be copyright infringement, so they sued Suno. And Suno, filed their answer. They filed their response to the lawsuit this week. And among the things that were pretty groundbreaking about their answer, Gideon, was one, they did admit that they used copyrighted material to train their platforms. That was the first time they've ever publicly admitted that. That's a pretty, powerful fact, even though most people knew it already.
Of course.
And secondly, I think the way that they wrote their answer to the complaint was interesting. Quick little kind of legal background here. Normally when an answer is written to a legal complaint by a defendant, it's usually like a pretty quick perfunctory. You just use numbered paragraphs to respond to each allegation one by one, get in, get out. Suno writes this like long Shakespearean essay in the beginning talking about how the labels are just afraid of competition and how technology is a good thing for art. Like, they didn't write this complaint for a judge. They wrote this complaint to get public opinion on their side. And I thought that was pretty interesting. What did you make of it?
Oh, dude, this thing is just a complexity salad. On the one hand, I do at some level buy the argument that the AI companies are making that while they train their mechanism on copyrighted material, their output, when you put a prompt in and you say, please write me a love song about, a breakup I had in Chicago, the output might very well be a result of the fact that their machine learning learns the rules of music and then makes creative output, which is different than copying and gets into the whole fair use thing and all kinds of other things. So I guess what I would say is everyone is full of it in this situation. Suno Nudio are engaging in grand theft larceny on a widespread basis. Okay, they are taking copyrighted materials. They're taking those copies. Sure, there's some innocence. Sure, there's some machine learning that learns the rules of music. But lots of that music sounds like Beatles songs, and lots of that music is damn close to an Adele song.
And to your point, it should be noted that if Suno and Udio are guilty of copyright infringement, or if they're found liable, the liability is infinity billion dollars.
Well,
it's incalculable.
In the complaint, in the pleadings, they're saying 150,000 per song. So it's essentially infinite dollars. To your point, right? So I guess what I would say is they're full of it in saying that the work is truly original. They're not full of it in saying that in advancing the fair use argument. They're not full of it in saying that AI is learning the rules of music to create music, because it certainly is. And the labels, of course, are absolutely beside themselves that there's this new mechanism that can just create original content away from the economic clasp of their entities. And so their arguments, are kind of absurd. But at the end of the day, without getting into every single legal concept here, which I've tried to understand and tried to study, although I suspect my understanding is flawed, I think everything ends up in a deal. And I think what's going to end up happening, although some lawyer friends of mine say, no, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, is the labels are going to get a piece of the action, like they always do, because there's no way to truly litigate this to the end. There's no way to prove how much is truly original. What does it mean to be real original? There's fair use. There have been so many decisions on fair use with conflicting implications. It's not even funny. So like at the end of the day, they're going to get a piece of the action because this is mutual. This is the Cold War, right? If anybody truly wins this, it's death. So nobody can stand the possibility of really being on the losing end of this endless sprawling litigation. They're just going to settle, man. They're going to settle one way or the other. By the way, as you know, like most litigation does, it just settles. And that's what's going to end up happening. I'm completely grossed out by AI music as a guy who writes songs, every day and who plays instruments and grew up in music. It's repulsive to me that I can go on Suno and type in, write a song about my motorcycle crashing in California, and it spits out obviously not a great pop song, but it's not that horrible. So I'm completely sickened by it, put off by it, and terrified by it. But you can't stop this train, as John Mayer would say, right? You can't stop this train, and they're going to settle, and everybody's going to have to live with the fact that this exists and it's not going anywhere. Do you disagree with me on that? Do you think it's not going to be? Do you think they're not going to settle in one way or the other?
I think mean, I could see them settling just because like the potential liability is so significant.
That's what I'm saying.
That like they're better off settling. I think you know what could happen is that there's a settlement and then Congress passes some kind of law to try to figure out how to reconcile with this. I don't think you know, AI technology is just, it's not going anywhere. And I don't think we're going to be able just to have a world where it's just like AI can't use copyrighted material. Like, because
that's what I'm saying.
So like, there's going to have to be some way that this is done legislatively. I don't love the idea of just like the labels getting cut in on a deal. Like Spotify was partially owned by the labels, because that sounds like a great way for labels to make money and independent artists to get nothing, even though their stuff's going to continue to get used for these AI platforms. I don't love that one bit. But the fair use question is interesting, and I'll close on this before we take a break and bring in David Cook, which is, I mean, I wouldn't say that I am the number one fair use expert when it comes to music, but if you had to make a list of like the top 100, I might be somewhere in there. Right. I mean, like it's an area of which I would purport to have expertise.
Gotcha.
And I have no idea how a court might rule on this, because fair use is so malleable as a doctrine. It's just whatever judge you get in front of you. It's a 4-factor test. You can squint at those 4 factors in 100 different ways and get 100 different responses. And so whatever judge this gets in front of, whatever appellate court this gets in front of, whatever side of the bed those judges wake up on that day is going to affect the fair use ruling. And that fair use ruling is going to be the most important music copyright ruling in American history, because this case goes down, how this case gets resolved is going to have indescribable implications for the music industry and copyright law going forward. I implore all independent creators, lawyers, musicians, everybody in this field, keep an eye on this case. It is so important.
Totally, man. I agree. And that's why, just to finish on your finish for 4 seconds, it's so difficult to predict the paths, the disparate impact and the paths that this litigation is going to take. And that's why I think at the end of the day, you got to settle, because you're setting off so many nuclear bombs. You don't know which are going to land on your shores. And that's why I just think they're going to have to settle in one way or the other. And labels are going to get a piece because they have a point. And so does Suno and Udio. I'm personally offended by Suno and Udio. I hate them. I'm offended by them. They sicken me. The whole process sickens me. But that has nothing to do with the litigation. That's me having a little outburst before you bring your guest on. I thought I'd have a little outburst, if that's okay with you.
America, the world even loves a Gideon King outburst. Frankly, if we didn't get a Gideon King outburst in the first segment, I feel like the fans weren't going to get their money's worth. So we appreciate you got that in just under the wire. We're going to take a quick break and be joined by our guest, David Cook, here on Break the Business. Don't go anywhere. Break the Business is presented in cooperation with Ryan A. Kairalla, PA. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA is a law firm providing transactional entertainment legal services, including contracts, business formation, commercial law, copyright, trademark, and more. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA, Miami, Florida. rkpalaw.com.
Streaming services for Break the Business provided by LEK Entertainment. LEK Entertainment is a full-service entertainment company offering everything from consultations to full-scale events and productions, including audio and video productions, voiceovers, staged theatrical productions, script and music development, and streaming services. For more information, visit lekentertainment.com. LEK Entertainment wants to help you bring your story to life.
Thanks for supporting Break the Business. If you have a question or topic that you want us to discuss, email us at breakthebusiness@gmail.com. You can follow the host, that's me, on Twitter at Ryan Kair, and you can follow the show at the BTB Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and on all major podcast platforms. And now, let's get back to the show. Welcome back to Break the Business, everybody. Ryan Kairalla, joined by Gideon King, just having an absolute blast. Despite the fact that we're talking about some pretty dang heavy topics, I'm still here with a smile on my face. Thank you for checking us out wherever you check us out, whether it's on SiriusXM 145, our new live streaming home at volume.com, or any of the other places where you can take us in as either an audio program, radio program, video, podcast, wherever you are enjoying this show. We're so glad that you are. Thank you for being part of our community, and thank you for telling a friend and helping us grow that community. Let's go ahead and bring out our guest this week.
Strum the chords, feel the blast. Rock it hard, make it last. David Cook, he's our star. Break the business, raise the bar.
Our guest this week is a platinum-selling rock singer-songwriter and Season 7 American Idol winner whose latest single, Dead Weight, dropped on July 19th. You can find out more about his work by visiting davidcookofficial.com and volume.com/davidcook. We are happy to welcome David Cook on To Break the Business. Hi, David.
Hi, and I do want to say really quickly, that's the first time I've ever been on something like this where there was an intro song that had my name in it. So I feel like 10 feet tall right now. That was great.
We aim to please, sir, because
good stuff.
you've given me so many happy moments over the years, David.
now we're even.
Absolutely right. Yep. Yeah, exactly. You creating one of my favorite television moments ever, equal to this tiny little thing that I did for you just now. We're on the same page for sure.
Yeah. I feel like the debt's been paid in full, and you're free to go. So well done.
Good night, everybody. Now, there's a lot that I dig about you, David, and I gushed about a lot of it in the beginning of the show when we first introduced that you were coming on. But one thing that I didn't talk about that I think a lot of people might not know about you, but I think is really cool, and I know producer Lauren is going to think is really cool, is that you, David Cook, deep in your heart, are a theater kid.
Yeah, it's true.
And I know a lot of people are saying, oh, of course he's a theater, he's into theater like he was in Kinky Boots on Broadway. No, I mean, you were a theater kid. You were in the drama classes. You were doing high school theater productions. You got that theater kid stuff in your bones, my man.
Yes, I do.
So let me ask, can you give us one theater kid story from your childhood, something that just screams David Cook's a theater kid? Because I'm a theater kid. Producer Lauren, my sister, she's a theater kid, and I know you're going to speak to our experience with this.
Yeah. So one of my first plays that I ever did was in middle school, and it was called Coming of Age, and it was about exactly what it sounds like it was about. I got one of the male leads. I was in 6th grade, and there was a female character who was my pseudo love interest, and she was in 8th grade, so that was a big deal. And her name was Amy Gwynn. I doubt she's watching, but if she is, great. And it was I ended up having a little bit of a crush on her at the time, because there was a scene where we got really, really close to kissing. She was teaching me French. Her character was teaching me French, and that was sort of
French, you say?
Yeah. That was
the language.
That was really when my love for theater started. I was like, all right, cool. I could get used to stuff like this. And what I love about it more than anything now, especially having been fortunate to get to do Kinky Boots on Broadway, I love the community aspect of creativity. Being a solo artist, it's something that I don't get, particularly, growing up playing in bands and stuff, and being able to bounce ideas off of one another in the creative process. I missed that doing the solo thing, and so to be able to revisit that with Kinky Boots was a huge shot in the arm. I loved doing that show, and it really did reinvigorate my love of theater.
Oh, we're really glad that you got brought back into it from that, right? I think I'm thrilled for you that you got sort of an opportunity to rekindle that love from your childhood, because most of us theater kids out there, the theater kind of ends at being a kid. You don't get another chance to go back to it, and then you have to start a radio show like a weirdo and bring your friends on to talk every week, and find other outlets for it. But people like you who actually have talent and can sing get to go on Broadway, so that's awesome for you.
Yeah. I mean, I went to college on a theater scholarship and then gave it up because the band I was in was starting to tour regionally, and I was like, well, I can't do both. And so I gave up the theater scholarship, much to my parents' chagrin, because it paid for my books. I've made a ton of just really dumb money decisions over the years that just happened to pan out. But yeah, it was nice to be able to open that door up again.
Love that. All right. Now, I promise, okay, this is my solemn vow. You have this is from the Ryan Kairalla guarantee here, okay?
All right.
I'm only going to ask you one American Idol question.
You can
all
ask
right?
as many as you want, my guy.
Are you sure? Because like that I don't want to annoy you with this.
I do not. I harbor no ill will towards my experience with the show. I tell people all the time, I'm so glad I did it, but I would never do it again. But it is. Listen, man, it's afforded me a life and a career that certainly was not in the cards on the other side. So I'd be pretty disingenuous if I was like, no questions about Idol, please. So yeah, fire away, man. Whatever.
We just did a whole segment about how how do you feel if your career got boosted by something that has a complicated legacy? So
I was sitting. I've been sitting off camera, like listening this whole time, and we were talking in the private chat during the break. Just like I want in on this conversation so bad.
Okay.
Yeah, it's listen, man, my experience with Idol, I really don't have anything overtly negative to talk about when it comes to Idol. I mean, I've got my little like behind the scenes stories and shit like that, or stuff like that, excuse me. But yeah, man, I was really fortunate. I don't really recall having had any sort of like Lou Pearlman experience. But I can only imagine just the turmoil that has to exist. Like, yeah, this guy did some horrible stuff.
I don't see like,
but it's just, to your point earlier, Gideon, it's like, where would you be without that person who did those horrible things kind of giving you that boost? You know what I mean?
David and Ryan, to be honest, like I work with some people who have been on these shows, Caleb Hawley, Ashley Hess, people who made it far deep, and they're all in my band. And you know what? They're like better performers for having been on American Idol. They're like, they like come in, they nail it. They're pros. They're good with 3-part harmonies. They come in and they perform, to be honest, kind of like at a level that most other singers don't. So like
it's performance boot camp for sure.
I don't know why. I don't know why anyone would shrink from or not want to mention making it all the way to the end. If you make it all the way to the end of one of these things, you're a freaking great singer. Like, and that's like for me. That's
I am. But
but you are.
Go on.
You are a killer singer, and so are these people I work with. They're different, Ryan, than other people. It's like they've been in front of big crowds. You take them on a gig, and they kick ass.
Yeah, it's I learned more in that 4.5 months that I was on the show than I probably learned the 10 years prior. I was just fortunate that I was able to use the 10 years prior experience to sort of navigate my way through the 5 months. So
that was incredible insight that you just shared. I'm glad that you did, but you didn't actually let me ask
I'm so
American
sorry.
Idol question.
And we're
because,
out of time,
like
so.
your answer was actually far more impressive than the question I'm going to give, because the question I give is going to be just such a stupid fanboy question. But here it is, okay? I remember when you won that thing. And, it was pretty formative for me because, as I said in the first segment, I was like, oh, my God, this is like the first rock kind of singer that's winning American Idol. And that's super cool. And I love this guy. He's great. I was rooting for him from the very first audition. But I remember when you won and you were standing next to David Archuleta. And when they announced your name, you were so cool about it. You didn't jump up and down. You didn't cheer. You didn't scream. Like, it was the most cool as a cucumber. Like, you kind of hugged Archuleta, like hearty handshake, but like almost like you knew it was going to happen, or like you just fully internalized it. How did you not just completely lose your shit in that moment?
So I talk about this on stage almost every night at shows.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. No, we had rehearsal that morning, like early that morning for all the group numbers and the band performances we got to do. Like I got to rehearse with ZZ Top and then perform with them that night. And that was a little name drop. Don't worry about it. And
pick that up.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
I love ZZ Top.
And one of the producers came up and told us like how many votes there were. There were over 100 million votes the night before, which is stupid. And then the winner, he didn't say who won, but he said the winner won by 12 million votes. Now I had it in my head that if I was going to win, it was going to be a razor thin margin. So 12 million felt like a lot. And I mean, it was about 10% of the total vote. So I thought, okay, I took second, whatever. Like I get to stand on stage, the middle of the stage, the last night of this season. Second place is awesome out of 103,000 people that auditioned that season. Like that's great. So I had the best experience the last day of the show, like, because I had no pressure. I didn't feel, like I had to prove myself anymore. It was just like I took second place on a national television show singing competition. It's pretty rad. And then Ryan said my name, and I knew before. I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do. He's going to say David Archuleta. I'm going to turn. I'm going to give him a hug. I'm going to tell him I love him, and I'm going to get out of the way. And then he said my name, and I turned. And I gave Archie a hug, and I told him that I loved him. And right as I'm like giving him a hug and telling him I love him, that's when it was like, oh no, he said my name.
No.
And it's conscious blackout. I have no first person recollection of the next 30 minutes. It was like my brain just had to reboot.
You already had your reaction preloaded.
Yeah.
And you got like 8 or 9 seconds into it before you realized, oh crap, he said David Cook.
Because I thought there's no way he's going to say my name. Like all season, we were all sort of we felt like we were all sort of performing to catch Archie's scraps. Like he was a juggernaut from note one. Yeah. And like every time we're in front of an audience, they lose their mind around this kid. So
yeah, he was like the young teen, like all the younger girls were like, he seemed like the right fit for the Idol demo.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had looked, looking at the history of the show, there were rock singers before me. There was Daughtry, there was Bo Bice. And they weren't able to quite get there. And I just looked at that as like, okay, rock singers, there's a ceiling here for rock singers, and that's okay. I didn't really go in with like, I'm going to break through that ceiling. I was just like, hey, I don't know how I'm here, but I'm here, and let's try to make the best of it. And so it's so funny. Like, I get asked about that moment and kind of the next hour after, and it's just what I've seen on YouTube. I don't remember it first person, which is pretty nuts still. Like 16 years later, I'm still like, I know that my shirt malfunctioned and my belly button showed on national TV during the closing credits. I know that. Which is unfortunate. So,
all right, you let me get the fanboy question in. I'm sure Gideon's got more serious ones for you.
I got one
ahead,
for
Gideon.
you.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at your being wildly unprofessional here and looking at my iPhone while we're literally broadcasting.
It's all right.
I'm looking at you on Spotify.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing the time of my life.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm seeing 23, call it 24, but who's counting, million streams. Okay. That's a little different than the 500,000 streams that I have on my biggest song. Slightly different by
you guys are neck and neck.
Yeah, we're neck
You're
and
right
neck,
there,
okay?
man. You're
so
right
let's leave it at that for a moment. And you have 271.8 thousand followers. Those are good numbers. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are real numbers. Okay. What is it that what is the benchmark for success for you? Is it having a body of work? Is it getting to a certain number of streams? Is it feeling good about what you do? What is success in your mind? Truly, what is success? Of course, you want 5 billion streams on a song. I mean, who doesn't?
Sure,
but
sure.
what are the benchmarks?
Well, if I get
by
5
which
billion,
you
I could
truly...
probably buy a new fridge. That'd be great, right?
That's true. You could. That's right. You could buy a car. I agree with that. Probably not actually with streaming rates. Probably not.
Yeah,
you could buy one of those.
That's
you could buy
a
one of those.
different episode.
Yeah,
A
you
real
could buy
beater.
one of those little refrigerators that are 2 feet tall. So
Exactly.
So exactly. So what is success really for you? What this is an interesting question, I think, for a lot of different people in many walks of life.
The answer to that question is not static. It does shift. I think right after Idol, I wanted 10 good years in the industry. I wanted, if I could tour and put out records for 10 years, and then at the end of that, like if nothing else happens, cool, man. Like I'm good. I'll use my graphic degree somehow. And, and now I'm 6 years past that. if I'm able to look myself in the mirror and say that I'm happy, um, and then I've got a comfortable life, and I'm able to take care of the people that I love and the pets that I love. Man, that's success to me. I think I've been in the middle of both extremes. I remember uh, having $24 in my bank account and not and I'm 6 months behind on rent. It wasn't that long ago. I remember that. And I remember having like, millions of dollars in my bank account, and I'm playing to 100,000 people in the Philippines, and all the post idol, um, uh, peripheral crazy stuff that happens. Um, I've had both of those extremes, and so it's a kind of just to be able to comfortably live somewhere in that gray area in the middle. That's success to me, because everything else is um, flattering but not real.
Right.
And,
I
and
got
to
one.
me,
Oh, I'm
sorry, go
sorry.
ahead.
I was going to fire. I'll do one more quick one for
Please.
you. Do you think music is becoming less musical over time? Do you think? I mean, like you're a guy that did theater. You're a
Mhm.
guy that could be brought into a studio and you could do three parts and you play instruments, and so you are actually a musician. You're not up on stage with a laptop and some tracks. Okay, not that I'm disparaging those people.
Not yet.
Of course, while I disparage them, exactly, you might do that.
Correct.
You could be the next Calvin
You're gonna hate
Harris.
my next record.
Right,
Oh, no.
exactly. Shit. But do you think music is like getting, I don't want to say worse, but just less musical in general? I kind of do.
I think it depends on what you mean by less musical. I think from a popular music standpoint, uh, I think there's less variety.
Hmm.
I think the lanes have narrowed.
Mhm.
Um, uh, I think what used to play on like hot adult contemporary radio versus what plays now, I think that gap between that and like top 40 has narrowed significantly.
I see what you mean.
Um, it sort of feels to me anyway that and I use radios, terrestrial radio, sort of the example. You have country, you have a sort of a small lane for rock, and then you just have everything else sort of just crammed into one lane.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I certainly don't believe that existed 20 years ago.
It did.
If you mean musically by like complexity or anything like that, I look at I tend to cover a lot of 80s songs because I love that genre or that decade of music.
Yeah.
There are intricacies in that stuff that certainly don't seem to exist now. I think popular music has certainly gotten more formulaic, which is disappointing, but it might also inform why music seems to have become more of a disposable artistic medium. I don't think people put as much value on music as I would love for them to. And I say that, not purely from a financial standpoint, although that's part of it. But I think, you guys were talking earlier about AI and this lawsuit. Like, I hope that the AI companies lose that case, and I hope the labels don't see a dime. Because I feel like every time we get into these conversations about oh, the labels are suing X, or X is suing Y, or whatever, invariably the part of the conversation, the part of the piece that never gets really discussed is the content creators, the artists, the songwriters.
Totally.
And that's because I'll use acting as a comparison. They just had the big SAG-AFTRA strike last year. Music could never do that because there's no it's not essential for you to join a musician's union. Therefore, it's not essential. You can undercut each other.
Right. And songwriters are independent contractors. They're not employees,
Yes,
so they
yeah.
can't even unionize.
Even as a solo artist, the guys that play with me live when I do full band shows, they're independent contractors.
Totally.
We don't have a seat at the table. And so when you have these, if they do settle, I guarantee you who's going to lose that case is going to be the content creators, the songwriters.
For sure. There's no doubt about it.
100%. And that is such, again, sorry if this is wrong, but that is such a kick in the dick. It's just, I feel awful for where the current landscape of music is. Somebody's going to come along and come up with $1 billion. Like some artist's going to come along making a record out of his or her basement, and it's going to make $1 billion, and they're going to have solved so many issues. But right now, it's easier than ever for somebody to listen to you, and it's harder than ever to be heard, which is
There's no
a
doubt
problem.
about it. No doubt about it.
Man, so I mean,
Sorry, I've been sitting back here just wanting to go off on my soapbox for a while.
No, I'm thrilled that you brought in that perspective, because that's something that I don't think we gave enough discussion to when we were talking about this in the prior segment, and that really there's only going to be one loser in this litigation, and it's going to be the creators who do not have a seat in this litigation and don't have a seat in the table generally. We're about to lose radio here, David, and I'm sad that we didn't get time to talk about like the Red Rabbit Society, this great fan club you have.
Yeah, all the stuff my manager told me I was supposed to talk about.
Yeah, the terrific work that you're doing on volume.com. Viewers, listeners, listen to me. Go check out volume.com/David Cook. He's doing some of the best stuff on this platform. As a fellow volume.com program, like we look up to the really cool stuff that David Cook's doing there. You can also check out davidcookofficial.com and David's latest single, Deadweight, which is available now. Huge fan of everything you got going on, David. Before we let you go, we got one last question for you. Do you have any last tips for the indie creators out there to help them move their careers forward?
From a musician standpoint, it's your audience is not going to find you. You're going to have to go find your audience. As a musician, that means going out and playing shows. Early on, man, I took every single opportunity to play a show, whether there was money in it or not. I remember one gig we drove from Warrensburg, Missouri, where we were all in college, to suburban Indianapolis for a one-off show. We had to draw 50 people in a market we'd never played to make $50, and we fell short. But I got experience from that. Like, so you have to go find your audience, and it's going to take some humbling moments for sure. I've played more 4-H county fair things than I'd ever care to mention, but yeah, man, that's how you gain experience. That's how you figure out your voice. That's how you have to figure out how to be comfortable on a stage in front of people, and to be able to tell a story through song or whatever your medium is, in a way that connects with people.
David, no kidding. I have a country mile long list of things that I would be thrilled to talk with you about. If you ever came back again, please don't be a stranger.
We'll have to do it again. We'll have to. Yeah,
I would love nothing more.
Cool.
This has been a treat, and I'd love to chat with you again real soon.
Yeah, man.
Our thanks to David Cook, co-host Gideon King, and producer Lauren, and of course our thanks to all of you viewers and listeners for checking out Break the Business. We'll see you next week.